Son, there's a kind of silence that doesn't come from peace. It comes from being forgotten. I never thought I'd live long enough to feel it. My name's Henry. I'm 76. And once, I was a man who believed family was everything. I raised my boy, David, with the kind of love that burns through your bones. Love that makes you work double shifts and still come home with a smile just to see your kid eat. His mother passed when he was 16. I remember holding him that night. He cried so hard I thought he'd break. I promised him I'd never leave his side, no matter what. But life doesn't always hold the same promises we make. Does it? Years passed. He married a beautiful young woman named Claire. Smart, ambitious, and sharp-tongued when she wanted to be. At first, I thought she was good for him. She made him laugh again. I was happy. But after the wedding, things began to change. Subtle things. Conversations that used to last hours became short. Dinners became takeouts. My presence became an inconvenience. Then one evening, everything changed forever. I had been living with them since my arthritis got worse. It was a Thursday, David's favorite night to order pizza. But that night, instead of laughter, there was tension in the air. I heard them arguing in the kitchen. Claire's voice cut through the silence. "He's your father, not mine. I didn't sign up to take care of an old man." And then David's voice, quieter, tired. "He's got nowhere else to go, Claire." I held my breath. My hands trembled on the armrest. Then I heard her say the words that would haunt me. "Then take him somewhere he belongs, because he's not staying here while we're on vacation. He'll rot in this house alone." My heart sank. And then David said something I'll never forget. "Fine, I'll handle it." The next morning, he came into my room with that same calm face he had when he was a boy trying to hide something. "Dad," he said softly, "Claire and I are going on a trip for a week. We're dropping you off at a senior care place. Just for a few days, you'll have company, food, nurses. You'll like it." I smiled, even though I knew he was lying to both of us. He couldn't even look me in the eyes. When we got there, the place looked like an old forgotten hospital. The walls were gray, the smell of bleach mixed with loneliness. A nurse took my bag and said, "You'll be fine here, Mr. Henry. Your son said he'll check in later." But he never did. Days passed. My phone never rang. The staff said they couldn't reach him. Every night, I sat by the window watching the road, hoping I'd see his car, maybe his smile. But he never came. One night, as I lay there unable to sleep, I whispered to myself, maybe this is how it ends. Maybe this is where I rot. But fate, it has its own way of spinning the wheel. Because that same week, something happened that made the world spin back toward justice. But before I tell you what it was, let me ask you something, my friend. If the child you raised with love left you to suffer alone, would you ever be able to forgive them? Tell me honestly in the comments. I really want to know. Because for me, forgiveness didn't come easy. And before I continue, if you've ever felt abandoned or unappreciated by the very people you loved the most, just leave a broken heart in the comments. This story isn't just mine. It belongs to every heart that's been left behind. Because what happened next proved that no matter how dark it gets, love and karma always find their way home. The nights in that care home were colder than I can describe. You could feel loneliness creeping through the cracks in the walls, whispering to you that you'd been forgotten. The lights buzzed overhead, always flickering. Like even electricity didn't want to stay. I remember lying there, watching an old clock tick past midnight, wondering where my son was. David used to call me every night when he was in college, just to say, "Love you, Dad." But now, even the sound of his voice had become a memory I had to fight to remember. The nurse, a kind woman named Martha, noticed my silence. "Mr. Henry," she said one evening, setting down my soup, "you've barely touched your food again. Everything all right?" I smiled faintly. "Just missing home," I said. She looked at me with the kind of pity that hurts more than anger. "I've seen it before," she whispered. "Children forget the hands that raised them, until life reminds them." Her words lingered. Until life reminds them. That night I prayed not for revenge, but for truth. Because sometimes the only thing worse than being forgotten is being remembered too late. 3 days passed. Still no call. Still no sign of David. But on the 4th morning, I woke to chaos. Nurses were whispering in the hallways. One of them had a newspaper in hand. I heard bits and pieces: car accident, storm, tourist couple, coastal highway. My heart pounded. I asked Martha, "What happened?" She hesitated, her eyes soft. "It's all over the news. A couple went missing near the coast. Their car was swept away by the floodwaters. Police are searching." She didn't say names. She didn't have to. I knew. I felt it in my bones, the way a father always knows. I sat there for hours, my hands shaking on the armrest, staring at nothing. Was this karma? Was this punishment? No. This was life reminding us that cruelty always circles back. But pain never feels good, even when it comes for those who hurt us. Later that evening, Martha came in again, holding her phone. "Mr. Henry, they found them." My heart stopped. She continued, "They're alive, thank God. Injured, but alive. They're in the hospital a few towns over." And for the first time in weeks, I cried. Not because I was relieved they survived, but because I didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Should I be happy? Angry? Vindicated? All I felt was old. Old and tired of being the man who gives love and never gets it back. The next morning, the phone at the reception rang. Martha called out, "Mr. Henry, someone's on the line for you." My heart leapt. Maybe it was David. Maybe he realized what he'd done. I took the phone, my hands trembling. "Dad," his voice weak, raspy. "David," I whispered. "You okay, son?" There was a long pause. Then he broke down crying. "Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. We were stuck. The storm came out of nowhere. Claire's in surgery. I thought I'd never see you again." His words hit harder than any punishment could. Because sometimes, regret doesn't come when you lose things. It comes when you almost lose everything. I wanted to scream, "You left me to rot." But all I said was, "You'll be all right, son. Just come home when you can." My voice cracked. I didn't want him to hear the tears. When I hung up, Martha smiled softly. "Forgiving even now?" she asked. I looked out the window. The first snow of winter had started to fall. "Forgiveness isn't for him," I said quietly. "It's for me. So my heart doesn't rot like these walls." But little did I know, that phone call wasn't the end of it. It was just the beginning of a truth that would break everything open and change my son's heart forever. When they finally discharged me from that care home, winter had already settled like a thick blanket over the town. The trees were bare, and the air had that quiet bite that always reminds me of long nights and harder years. Martha hugged me goodbye at the door. "You're stronger than you think, Mr. Henry," she said. "Go home. Make them see you." I nodded, clutching the small duffel that held everything I owned. My son had said he'd pick me up, but when the hours passed and the snow began to fall heavier, I realized I was alone again. I took the bus, slow, rattling, and half empty. Each mile closer to that house felt heavier than the last. When the driver finally stopped at my street, I stepped out into the biting wind. The house looked the same. Big porch, white fence, Christmas lights still half hanging from last year. But there were no lights on inside. I knocked once. No answer. I knocked again, harder this time. Nothing. Then I saw it, taped to the front door. A note. "Dad, we had to leave town for a few days. Claire needs rest. We'll talk soon." David. My heart dropped. After everything, after the storm, the apology, he was gone again. I sat down on the porch step, my breath fogging in the air. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I'd been ready to forgive, ready to start over. But forgiveness only works when someone's there to take it. I waited there until dark, shivering under that note like it was a blanket. Then, from the corner of my eye, I saw movement next door. My neighbor, Mrs. Parker, opened her door. "Henry? My lord, is that you? What are you doing out there in this cold?" She took me in without a question, made me tea, covered me with a blanket. When I told her what had happened, She shook her head. Some lessons, she said softly. Life has to teach the hard way. 2 days later, the phone rang. It was David again, voice trembling. Dad, Claire had a breakdown. The doctors said it's stress. She keeps saying she sees things. Here's your voice, saying, you'll rot in here. I stayed quiet. I hadn't said that phrase aloud, but I remembered it. She had, that night in the kitchen. Maybe the echo of her own cruelty was what haunted her now. Dad, he continued, I don't know what to do anymore. Everything's falling apart. And for the first time in my life, I didn't rush to save him. I just listened. A week later, David came home. Alone. He stood in Mrs. Parker's doorway like a boy again. Hair messy, face hollow, eyes wet. He didn't say a word for the longest time. Then he dropped to his knees and buried his head in my lap. Dad, I'm sorry. I was stupid. I let her words become mine. I thought taking care of you meant losing my life. But when you were gone, I realized I'd already lost it. I put my hand on his head, that same way I used to when he was small. His shoulders shook like he was carrying years of guilt. I didn't say anything right away. Silence sometimes speaks better than scolding. Finally, I whispered, You left me to die, son. But you came back before I did. That's what matters. He looked up at me with eyes that hadn't seen truth in years. I don't deserve forgiveness, he said. I smiled faintly. None of us do. That's why it's called grace. The next morning, he drove me back home. The house felt different now. Quieter. No anger in the air. Just shame and something like peace trying to grow again. As I walked inside, I saw the note still taped to the door. I took it down, folded it, and tucked it into my pocket. A reminder that love isn't about perfection. It's about returning, again and again until you finally get it right. David turned to me. Dad, can I stay for a while? Until Claire gets better? I looked at him and said softly, Stay as long as you need. Home's big enough for both mistakes and forgiveness. He smiled, tears in his eyes. For the first time in years, he meant it. But life wasn't done teaching us yet. Because a few days later, an envelope arrived in the mail. One that would reveal a truth none of us expected. It wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to David. And inside was something that would change how he saw everything about that care home and what I'd truly been through. The morning the letter arrived, I was sitting by the window, nursing a cup of coffee. The snow outside had melted into patches of gray slush, the kind that sticks to your shoes and makes everything feel heavier. David came in holding an envelope, his name printed in shaky handwriting. Looks old, he said. It was postmarked 2 weeks earlier, from the same town as the care home. He slid his finger under the flap and unfolded a sheet of paper yellowed at the edges. I watched his face change as he read. His lips parted slightly, then trembled. Dad, he whispered. It's from Martha. I frowned. The nurse. He nodded and kept reading aloud. Dear David, I hope this letter finds you and your father safe. I've debated for days about writing this, but I think you need to know the truth. When you dropped Mr. Henry off here, you told the staff you'd be back in a week. But a week passed, then 2, then 3. We tried calling, but the number you gave us didn't work. Your father never complained once. He smiled every morning and told everyone, My boy's busy, but he'll come soon. He shared his meals with the other residents who had none, helped fix our broken heater, and told stories that made people laugh. When the others went to bed, he'd sit by the window and whisper, That's my son out there, building his life. We knew he missed you, but he never once blamed you. He loved you the way only a father can, with a love that forgives before it's asked to. I hope one day you'll understand what kind of man he is, because I've seen a lot of fathers left here, but none who loved as quietly or as fiercely as yours. Take care of him. He's worth more than the world gives back. By the time David finished reading, his hands were shaking. The paper slipped from his fingers onto the table. Dad, he said, voice cracking. She's lying, right? You didn't really. I stopped him with a small shake of my head. I told you I'd be fine, didn't I? And I was, because believing you'd come back kept me breathing. He sat there for a long moment, his jaw tightening, tears streaming down his face. I don't deserve to call you father. I reached over and placed my hand over his. David, life's too short to measure who deserves love. We just give it, or we lose it. He looked down, tears hitting the letter. I left you to rot, he whispered. And you still prayed for me. I smiled faintly. That's what fathers do. We plant seeds, even when we know we might never see them bloom. That night, David cooked dinner for us. The smell of roasted chicken filled the kitchen. The same dish I'd missed that night Emily had texted, "Heat up the leftovers." He set 2 plates down and sat quietly across from me. I called Martha, he said. She cried when I told her you were home. She said you gave hope to everyone there. I chuckled softly. She gave hope to me too. We ate mostly in silence, the kind of silence that doesn't sting anymore. It heals. After dinner, David stood and said, "Dad, there's one more thing." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "This is for you." Inside was a check, the amount almost made me drop it. "I sold my car," he said quickly, "and a few other things. I want to fix up the house for you. You shouldn't live in those cold rooms anymore." I looked up at him, surprised. "You don't need to pay for forgiveness, son," I said softly. "You already earned it when you came back." He nodded, wiping his eyes. "It's not about paying. It's about building again, together." The following days passed quietly. We painted the kitchen, fixed the porch, laughed at things that didn't even matter. He'd come home from work early, help me with my medicine, talk about mom like he used to. But the biggest change wasn't in the house. It was in him. David had learned to pause, to listen, to care. And for the first time, I saw the boy I'd raised. The one who used to call every night just to say, "Love you, Dad." One evening, we got a call from the hospital. It was about Claire. She wanted to see us. David hesitated. "She's been asking for you, Dad." I looked out the window, the moonlight silvering the snow. "Then let's go," I said. "If she's asking, she's ready to learn too." At the hospital, Claire was sitting up in bed, thinner than I remembered. Her eyes were swollen, but her voice was soft when she spoke. "Mr. Henry, I don't know how to apologize for what I said, or what I made your son do. I thought love meant control. I was wrong." I smiled gently. "Love isn't control, dear. It's letting someone come back when they've fallen." She nodded, tears glistening. "You still have every reason to hate me." I shook my head. "Hate only makes the heart rot, and I've had enough of rotting places." She laughed weakly through her tears. "You're too good, Henry." "Not good," I said softly. "Just old enough to know anger's too heavy to carry." When we left the hospital that night, David turned to me. "Dad, you really forgive her?" I looked at him, then up at the sky. "I forgave both of you the moment you left me," I said, "because I knew someday life would bring you back. Not through guilt, but through love." He was silent for a while, then smiled. "You were right, Dad. Karma never forgets." I chuckled. "Neither does grace." But that wasn't quite the end. Because a week later, David asked me to join him somewhere special, back at the care home. And what happened there would become the final chapter of our story. The drive back to the care home was quiet. Snow was falling in slow, lazy flakes, coating the world in white, soft enough to look peaceful, cold enough to make you remember. David kept glancing at me from the driver's seat, his jaw tightening every now and then. I knew he was nervous, not of the cold or the road, but of the ghosts waiting at the end of it. When we arrived, the building looked smaller than I remembered. The paint had started to peel, the garden I once tended was buried under snow, and the window where I used to sit at night was fogged with frost. David parked the car and turned to me. "You ready, Dad?" I smiled faintly. "I was ready the day you came back, son." Inside, the smell of disinfectant and old wood filled the air. The nurse at the desk looked up, then gasped. "Mr. Henry?" she said, her eyes widening. I chuckled. "Still alive, Martha." She ran around the counter and hugged me tight. "Oh my God. You came back. Everyone's been asking about you." Room 12 hasn't been the same without your stories. David watched quietly, guilt flickering in his eyes. But Martha noticed. She turned to him and smiled kindly. And you must be David. Your father talked about you every single day. David swallowed hard. Even after what I did? Martha placed a gentle hand on his arm. Especially after that. She led us down the hallway, where familiar faces peeked from their doors. Old friends. Some still smiling, some just breathing. They waved, and I waved back. My heart heavier and lighter all at once. Finally, we reached room 12. It was exactly as I'd left it. The small wooden chair by the window, the knitted blanket folded neatly on the bed, the clock still ticking on the wall. David stood silently behind me. You really lived here, huh? I nodded slowly. I did more than live, son. I waited. I hoped. And somehow, that hope kept me warm. He looked down, his voice breaking. I wish I could erase it all. I turned to him, put a hand on his shoulder. Don't you see? You already did. By coming back, you erased the worst parts of it. The rest, well, they're just lessons. Then Martha handed me a small wooden box. You left this behind, she said. Inside were letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to David. Each one dated, written in my own shaky handwriting. David's breath caught. You wrote me? I smiled sadly. Every week. I didn't know where you were, but it made me feel like you could still hear me. He opened one. It was from the week after he'd left. Dear David, today was colder than usual. I fixed the heater for the others and told them about the time you tried to build a treehouse with your bare hands. You always wanted to reach higher, son. Wherever you are, I hope you're still climbing. David pressed the letter to his forehead, trembling. I don't deserve these words. I cupped his cheek gently. You don't earn a father's love, David. You live it. You remember it. You carry it forward. We sat there for hours, reading old letters, sharing quiet tears. When we finally stood to leave, the nurse stopped us. Mr. Henry, before you go, would you say a few words to the residents tonight? They still remember your stories. David looked at me, smiling faintly. You always did have a way with words, Dad. So that evening, they gathered everyone in the lounge. Wheelchairs, blankets, soft smiles. The same faces that had once been my family when I had none. I sat in front of them and took a deep breath. My friends, I began, my voice trembling with warmth. When I first came here, I thought I'd been abandoned. I thought my story had ended. But life has a way of surprising you. Because even when love leaves, it sometimes finds its way back. Worn, bruised, but stronger than before. I looked at David sitting in the back, his eyes red but shining. I learned something here, I continued. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's freedom. The world might forget you. Your family might turn away. But if your heart stays kind, it will guide them home again. The room was silent except for a few sniffles. Then a soft clap started, one, then two, then the whole room applauded. David stood up and walked to me. He wrapped his arms around me tightly and whispered, You're my hero, Dad. Always have been. I smiled against his shoulder. No, son. You just finally remembered who you were. That night, as we drove home under the soft snow, I looked out the window and whispered to myself, They said I'd rot in here, but I bloomed instead. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt whole, because forgiveness had given me back everything I'd lost. My son, my peace, my purpose.